My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Eric Pottmeyer. It's June 9th, 2025. We're at Eric's house in Portland. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here, or I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, first question. Let's get started with why wine?
Why wine? Well, for a number of reasons. Number one, it's delicious. More importantly, though, I think it's social. As excited as I get about wine, I'm even more excited about food, and the two go together so well. So I became interested in wine during a summer job, waiting tables. The wine program at the restaurant I worked at was pretty lame, but it got me interested in the idea of wine in general and then wine and food together. And like virtually anything in life, if you're really curious and interested in something, you're going to learn about it. So I started trying to learn about it. And then I was going to school at University of Oregon, and my goal was to become a psychologist. And indeed, I graduated with a psychology degree in 1991. And then I wanted to take a year off of studying because I'd been studying for years and years, and I've always had academic stuff hanging over my head, and I just wanted a little time out. And so I got a part-time wine job at Hollywood Fred Meyer's, which back in the day had a fantastic wine program. The wine stewards there had a lot of autonomy. And the wine steward there, Jean Osterhout, kind of took me under her wing. She knew I didn't really know a lot about wine, but she could tell I was passionate about it and was going to learn. Mm-hmm. So I started working part-time there as the as the backup wine steward, essentially. And I got more and more interested in wine, and I spent a lot of time reading about it and talking to people who knew more than me, which was everybody. And pretty soon I was like, hey, this is pretty interesting. Do I want to go back to school and do psychology? And I had this little dilemma because I'd wanted to be a psychologist since high school, and I was halfway there now. Knew I would probably make more money being a psychologist than having a career in the wine industry, but kept being drawn closer and closer into the wine industry. And I thought, psychology is fascinating, but when you start to practice it, I think it might be mentally burdensome, because you're trying to help people with their problems and their issues all day. And if you can't completely compartmentalize that, then you take that home with you. And I started to be concerned about that. And I thought, well, if there's that, and then over here on the wine side, if I take stuff home with me, that's not so bad. So I kind of, without making a conscious decision, drifted further into the wine industry. After like a year or so working at Freddy's, I was hired by Bob Leiner and Matt Elson at Leiner & Elson in 1995. And so that was my first full-time wine job. And I knew a little bit more about wine by the time I got there, but again, they could tell that I had the bug and that I was going to learn. And Matt Elson and Bob Leiner are a wealth of knowledge. Those guys had and still have an amazing understanding about wine. And they also were really good about knowing how to convey wine knowledge to customers in a way that would answer questions for the customer without being preachy to the customer. They made wine selling like super comfortable for customers. Customers loved them. Customers would come in, hang out. They'd buy some wine, but they would hang out. And so I learned from Matt and Bob a tremendous amount about wine and also how to relate to customers. And both of those things were invaluable to me. So I thought, okay, here now I've got this full-time job. There's no turning back. So that's why wine.
I love that. Okay, we'll pick it back up there in a second. Let's talk about life before wine a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Like almost everybody in the Portland wine industry, I'm not from Oregon. I'm from Pasadena, California, just outside of Los Angeles. My family moved here when I was 10. They had to pull me by the hair, kicking and screaming, because everybody and everything I knew was there, and I was going to this other state that I only knew my grandparents and one aunt and uncle in. And so I was in, I think, 4th grade at that time. Yeah, 4th grade. And, we moved up here, and things were pretty bumpy for a couple months while we finished out 4th grade. Then 5th grade started at a new school at the beginning of the year, and I felt like, oh, I'm fitting in here. This is nice. And in no time at all, I loved being in Oregon. I grew up in Tigard and lived in Tigard until I went to school in Eugene, and just loved growing up here. Made friends really easily. Schools were great, and then went to, so I was pretty much in Tigard. And then in high school, I went to school in Southeast Portland. So my little bubble of Oregon all of a sudden now included Portland, Oregon, not just Tigard and that area. And had a terrific high school experience. Got a pretty good education, good enough. You can probably tell. But made friends that I still have today, and friends that I love and cherish still today. So that was great, and that's where I kind of got interested in psychology and thought, hey, this is what I want to do. This analyzing business is interesting. So graduated from college in high school in 1986, and then went down to the U of O as a psychology major. I think midway through my freshman fall term, I realized school is amazing, college is amazing. I am in no hurry to get out of here. I'm going to be on the 5-year program. And then I stuck to that and did graduate in 5 years with a psychology degree. And I loved college, made good friends there, learned how to live with other people there outside of just my family. And I think learning how to deal with other people, some of whom are super easy to deal with and some not, is invaluable, and helps me and lots of other people all through life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And let's see, so what else was I going to say about college? So I'm a psychology major, thinking I'm going to be a psychologist. I didn't take a single business class while I was in school. No business classes, no finance classes, nothing like that. And I regret that now, because eventually down the road I started my own business and had no business background. Anyways, but college was great. Then I graduated from college, got married in, 1993. And that was fun, lived in John's Landing. And then, separated and got divorced in 2000. That was a rough patch. But I had an amazing core of friends that were incredibly supportive, and they got me through that. And miraculously, not too long after that, I met my wife, Praneet, who's amazing. And it was one of those situations where, like, okay, I was married for 7 years. Now I'm single. Oh shit, I gotta learn how to date again. Scared me quite a bit. Anyway, so I happened to meet Praneet at Liner and Elson. She was a customer, occasionally coming in, lived in the neighborhood in Northwest Portland. She'd come in and buy wine, and she'd come in and sometimes with one of her girlfriends, and they'd do a little flight of wine tasting on Friday nights. And I, at this point I was like, I'm a dummy. I haven't tried to date or be aware of what's going on in so long. I don't know what's going on, but like, I told my friend Pete, who I worked with, like, Pete, I think maybe she's a touch interested. I can't tell, but maybe she's a touch interested. Anyway, so we ended up going. She was at a Friday night tasting with one of her friends, and by this point we hadn't gone on any dates or seen each other outside the wine shop. But yeah, I could tell that we enjoyed chatting with each other, and she's like, Eric, do you want to go to a Radiohead concert with me? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, it's in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm like, whoa, that's a bit, but I'm like, I think I can do it. So it was hilarious because like a day or two later, she rescinded the offer because she realized if things didn't go well, that's a long drive up and a long drive back. Anyway, so we settled on going on a date that was a couple blocks away from where she lived and where I worked. And that went well, and we went on some more dates, and I was thinking, this is really, something I want to keep pursuing, and we kept dating, kept coming closer and learning more about each other. And the whole time in the back of my head, I'm like, it can't be possible that the first person I date is going to be somebody I end up with getting married to. But that's the way it was. Praneet's family is from the Punjab region of India. They moved over and immigrated when she was 8 years old. So unfortunately, no accent. But I met her family. Her family was amazing. They welcomed me in right off the bat. So the biggest part of my life is being married to Praneet, and it's the most important thing for me. And she's been very supportive throughout every stage of my career. And let's see.
Did you ever get to see Radiohead together?
Yes. After we were married, saw Radiohead a few times. They are amazing live. They are very good.
Excellent.
And didn't have to leave the country to go see them.
Backing up for a second, I'm curious about your interest in psychology. Where did it come from?
Study hall in high school. No, I think it came from a couple things. Just chatting with a couple friends in high school, not just over and over, about what makes people click and do different things and react different way to similar situations. I think geeking out on music and like listening to lyrics of certain songs that kind of had that vibe going on, and then reading just some things that are probably completely out of date and dismissed now by the psychological community, but were sure interesting. Mm-hmm. And I thought, people are really interesting, and what happens to people that are having, issues, and why are they having issues, and how can they be helped? And I thought that was all super interesting. Mm-hmm. So I still do think that's really interesting. I just realized it was not a career for me.
So pick it back up with Liner and Elson. You mentioned sort of first full-time job, and obviously learning lots about wine, but also learning lots about sort of business and customers and things like that.
Yes.
Tell me about some of the experiences there.
Liner and Elson has provided also the greatest educational component of wine for me. Since I didn't learn about wine at home growing up, I didn't learn about it at school, of course. I started really, really being immersed in wine 5 days a week with two of the most respected people in the industry in the state of Oregon, in Matt Elson and Bob Liner. And it was a wonderful way to learn about wine. I didn't take tests. I don't have letters after my name. But I got to learn about wine from two people who are highly regarded in that in their knowledge of wine, and I say knowledge just as knowing about this and that, but also their understanding about wine, which are kind of two different things. And so I would taste wine almost every day, sometimes for hours. With distributors would come in, and this is in the 90s, the late 90s, and distributors would come in, and back then wines weren't so precious and so expensive. We would taste everything from humble $10 Côte d'Arones to Premier and Grand Cru Burgundies, and I would get to taste these wines, smell taste, and have them cause an imprint on me. At the same time, I would listen to Bob and Matt talk about them, why this is that way, why this is important, why this is special. And so I got a two-pronged way to learn about the wine. I got to actually experience it physically, and then also have somebody talking to me about it. And this happened for, the 3 or 4, well, it kept going long after Bob and Matt told the story. It still happened. But I got this continual education, which is still going on today, of course. I also was influenced heavily at that time by, I don't know if customer is the right word, kind of customer, Matt Kramer. Anyway, so Matt Kramer would come in several times a week, probably because he was bored most of the time. But he would come in, and he scared the crap out of me. He was, I think he enjoyed scaring the crap out of me. Anyway, so he'd come in, so I knew him. And, he was pleasant to me and everything. So after I'd been there for, I don't know, a year or so, Bob and Matt wanted to get me out in front of the customer base more so that they could do other things and not have to always be the ones helping the customers. And so they thought I would get some street cred if I took a class from Matt Kramer. So they had me take this class from Matt Kramer. It was 4 Tuesdays or Wednesdays in a row or something like that in 1996. And the class was about 1993 red Burgundies. So one narrow topic. And I took the class, and I started out, and he'd give an introduction and say, this is what we're tasting, this is what the growing season was like. These producers and vineyards are, I think, important. And he correctly hypothesized that 1993 was going to be a terrific vintage when the wine press was not. Like Wine Spectator and Robert Parker were not excited about this vintage because it was tight and compact, not fleshy and juicy. And so he would talk about this stuff, and then we would all taste. We'd have a flight of like 4 wines, and we'd taste through them and then talk about them. And I think I was to Matt's right, and he just went around the table. And so I was the first person on the first night to actually have to talk about what I thought about these wines. And I think he says, well, what about wine number 1? Like, what about D'Andreville Clos de Duc? And I said, well, I think I like it because, and he stopped me, and he's like, I don't give a shit why you like it or what you think, tell me about the wine. And so I learned how to really, really focus on what I was tasting, and also how to discern the qualities of a wine regardless of whether I liked it or not. Because there are certain kinds of wines that you love and certain kinds of wines you like and certain kinds of wines you don't like. But the wines you don't like, if they're well made and are good examples, are still very important if you're got to sell them anyway. So I learned how to really focus and really pay attention to what I was smelling, what I was tasting, what I was texturally feeling, and have that be a strong imprint in my mind, which would come in handy later. And I think the overall experience after 4 weeks, Matt was kind of giving me like a pat on the back, kind of, in the best Matt Kramer kind of way. And after that, I was like, I had developed like this, like real confidence in my tasting. Not that I thought I was the greatest taster in the world, but he kind of taught me that what I was tasting was real, authentic, and worth mentioning if somebody asked. And so the confidence helped me a lot. And I think that the way I had to learn to taste so focused is always helped me going forward, because now I just do it without thinking. I don't have to concentrate it, and I just take those points in, and somehow they remain with me. Everybody's brain is different. I can't remember people's names. I embarrass myself constantly because I can't remember people's names. Right, Bill? No. But I can remember wines in an amazing way. I can remember not just fancy wines that are like, marquee wines. I can remember Côte de Rhônes that I tasted, 20 years ago, and how they relate to other Côte de Rhônes. I can remember kind of how a young wine relates to another wine that's older from the same winery in the same vineyard, and I can connect those dots in a weird way. I don't know how it works. I don't know why it works, but I don't know why those memories and impressions stay with me, but they do. And so they help me. They help me to understand new wines that I'm tasting and kind of have an understanding in the projected arc that wine will take. If it's a wine that's not supposed to be drunk right away, if it's supposed to age, I think it will age. Anyway, so I do owe a lot to Mr. Kramer, and he has become a kinder, gentler Matt Kramer, and I enjoy him. And he's a smart guy, and in terms of writing ability, he's far and away the best and most eloquent wine writer I've ever read. I've also learned, besides from like Bob and Matt, I've learned a lot from a couple of customers. Back in the old days at Liner & Elson, and let's see, I worked there from 1995 to 2010. Back in the old days, on Saturday afternoons after business had kind of died down, there were a handful of customers that would come in and they would open up wines, sometimes off the shelf, but more often than not they would bring wines from their own cellar. They'd bring mature bottles of Barolo, Barbaresco, Burgundy, Rhone, whatever. And sometimes some pretty cool older Oregon wines too. And so I would taste these mature wines, because I didn't have mature wines. I was young, and the wines in my cellar were not many and not very old at that point. So I would get to taste these older, mature bottlings, and that helped me understand the direction wines were going to go also. And we had this one customer, a couple customers, Ron Hauge and Toby Schlegel, who would do this on a regular basis, and they would share with you why they bought the wine, what they were thinking when they bought it, what they thought now. And there was such generosity amongst a handful of customers that used to do that. And I still see Ron every now and then. I see Toby with regularity, Toby Schlegel, the Godfather. He's helped me quite a bit, both in learning about wine and then also fast forwarding to when I started my own little business, Sec Wines. He's helped me a lot there too. And then I've learned a lot from my colleagues that I've worked with. I worked with, I learned a lot, not just by chit-chatting with them and while we're drinking the same wines, and not in a formal way, but an informal way. I worked with Pete Gibson, aka Peter Gibson, who's the biggest wine geek I know, and I know a lot of wine geeks. And he is so good at sharing his knowledge about wine, and sharing wine too. He's an extremely generous guy. And so I worked with him. I learned a ton working with Pete. I think next hire was, I'm going to get the order wrong, but Peter Leem. Peter is an encyclopedia of wine. He's a wine luminary. He lives in Champaign and has written an amazing Champagne book. He's written a great book on sherry. He has a great website, champagneguide.net. We're still close friends. I was hanging out with him in Champaign last month or the month before. Also with Pete Gibson. Nice. And so working with Peter was fun, and we bounce our ideas off each other after going home and making dinner and watching X-Files or something. And then so that was wonderful. Then next hire was Brian Martin. Brian Martin is another guy you might interview if you haven't. Brian Martin was fun to work with, and he didn't work at L&E too long, but he was great to work with, and also has a lot of insights on wine and wine characters that you might not pick up on your own, but then he says it and you're like, yeah. And Brian has gone on to have play a very, very, very important role in the Oregon wine industry. I think Brian is probably more responsible than anyone else, except for maybe Bob Leiner and Matt Elson, which bankrolled this operation. But Brian was hired by Galaxy Wine Company, who Bob Leiner and Matt Elson started Galaxy after they sold Leiner and Elson. And Brian started bringing over champagne producers that were not coming to the United States. And he started importing them, champagne producers nobody'd heard of, small little producers, that maybe made a couple thousand cases. Producers like Frederick Savart, Baresh, things that are now in demand all over the country that are allocated. He did this with lots of producers, and he built an amazing champagne portfolio for Galaxy Wine Company. One of the best champagne portfolios in the entire country. After starting SEC, I started really focusing on grower champagne, and a lot of these champagnes weren't available in other markets, and so I would ship lots of champagne to Manhattan, to San Francisco, markets you'd think would be way ahead of us, but we're not. So Brian was instrumental in that. He's still doing that with another company now, but he's still doing that, and he's still bringing in super interesting things, and he's a fun guy and a good friend. We hired, Mike DeMart. Mike DeMart is one of the nicest guys in the world. He's super interesting and fun. He's worked at he's been in the kitchen at Michelin-starred chefs in France. But luckily he decided to work at Leiner & Elson in Portland, Oregon for a while before moving on to Zancanella Importing, and then now he works with Pete Gibson, actually. Mike was wonderful. Mike kept us all sane when things would get hairy at the wine shop sometimes, and Mike also has a deep understanding about wine, and again, not wine statistics or this or that, but just an understanding about wine, and in a really gentle way of communicating that people are happy to soak up. Yeah, I think those are kind of my main kind of wine influences, and some of the more interesting people I worked with during that era. I worked at Leiner & Elson, as I mentioned, till the spring of 2010, and I left because some tension was developing in it there, or had developed already at the store, and it was starting to become a little uncomfortable, and so I left pretty much on my 15-year anniversary. I gave notice and everything, and I think the owner at that time was kind of happy I was leaving. Number one, because the United States was still trying to recover from the terrible recession of '08, and things were pretty dodgy financially still. And so I think, okay, God, this guy's he's off the books, and I can just worry about my other employees. And so I left in 2010, and or knew I had to leave, and was trying to figure out what to do. And I thought, well, maybe I want to be a distributor rep, or maybe work for an importer and have a territory, for an importer, and because I had relationships with all these people already, and so I considered that. And then the other thing I considered was starting my own little wine shop, but using a completely different model than I was used to at Leiner & Elson or any other storefront. And so I had this kind of crazy idea of well, what if I build a wine shop that's a virtual wine shop? It's an online wine shop. I don't have a brick and mortar store. Essentially, I have an office and storage space. And I thought, if I can keep my costs low, my overhead low, I can sell wine for less. And one thing I've learned, one thing I learned at Leiner & Elson is it doesn't matter how well off someone is to do, they want the best deal they can get. And it doesn't matter if it's a $15 wine or $100 bottle of wine. If they can get it for a tiny bit less, they're going to go for it. Mm-hmm. So I built a model that at the time was unique in the wine industry, and built on keeping things off-site, bringing them on site when people would order them, and selling them at a lower margin than was industry standard. And so I started at zero, with zero customers. And first year was earnings were skimpy, but they steadily built and kept building every year. Kept building, which was great. And so I thought, okay, great. My idea is actually working, and I probably don't have to go find another job right away. Knock on wood. Anyways, and so my model was kind of wacky because it was me all alone in an office staring at a computer screen and hoping orders would come in, and writing like little email blurbs here and there. And I thought I need to engage, find a way to engage people. So I had a newsletter that would come out once a month, and I would pick just a handful of wines, maybe 10 wines, and I'd try to have a broad spectrum to try to, have there be something for everybody. And so I tried to make those very personable, and so that it didn't sound like, well, nobody knows what AI generated was back then, but I didn't want it to sound AI. I didn't want it to sound robotic or like I was copying this from an encyclopedia. So I would put in things that like reflected my personality a little bit while describing the wine and why I thought it was interesting and worthy of attention. And so that kind of took, and then that email list built and became really important. I did everything by myself for the first 3 years. I mean, everything by myself. And I was working long hours. I'd be at the office for 8 hours, and I would come home and eat dinner and work for a few hours more. I'd work on the weekends, and just because I was trying to get the ball rolling, then keep it rolling. And it was a lot of work. I didn't mind it because I could see the business was starting to grow, and so there was satisfaction that way. But it was more work than I wanted to do, and I wasn't able to. I felt like I was missing out on things outside of work, and certainly wasn't going on a vacation. And so I hired my first employee, Allison Martin, in I think May of it was 2013. I think it was in May. Spent the first month training her, and she was a quick study and extremely competent. And so within a month, I was in Spain taking my first vacation that I'd taken in over 3 years. And so hiring my first employee, Allison, was wonderful. And in that, all of a sudden, if after the initial training period, it freed me up to focus on, hey, trying to sell wine rather than trying to do all the administrative stuff. And I still did some of that, but it allowed me to have more freedom and choose what I wanted to do and when I wanted to do it. And I still worked hard, but it gave me a lot of freedom that way. And it also allowed me to take days off when I needed or wanted to take days off. So that was great. Allison worked with me for, 3.5 years, I think, a little over 3.5 years. And as her parting gift to me, recommended I interview a person to replace her, who I ended up hiring. So in, I think October of 2018, I hired Clara Arnson, the person that Allison had said, hey, you should talk to this person. Clara was a bit kind of like me when I started out. She knew more than I did when I started out, but she really wanted to learn more about wine. And she would take wine classes and study wine, and had friends and that would study together and take tests, and she really enjoyed that quite a bit. But working in an environment where you get to taste wine and talk to somebody about wine whenever you want to was, I think, good for her, in that she got to learn a lot more about wine. And Clara is an amazing person, wonderful person, and I'm so fortunate that she worked with me from late 18 all the way up till some point in 2023, and she was great. I could leave for a week or two to go on vacation, and I knew things were going to run smoothly. She was such a pleasure to have in the office and work with. So she decided to retire in 2018, and she was great in that she's like, Eric, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to, take your time finding somebody else, but just start looking, type of thing. So I have a friend who he lived in Portland, and I had met him at Willamette Wine Storage. This guy, Lance Farman, and he was the day-to-day right-hand man of the owner, John Olmsted. And Lance, I met him at the wine storage place, and he would, he'd always be friendly. I'd deliver wine to Willamette Wine Storage customers for free because it makes a lot of sense. And anyways, and so I got to know Lance there, and he's such a nice, friendly guy. We kind of became friendly, and then Lance moved out of state for a few years because his significant other got into nursing at Yale. So they were in Connecticut for a while, but then Lance came back, and right about the time I needed to hire somebody after Clara was retiring. I called up Lance, and I'm like, Lance is never going to want to do this because at this time it's still a part-time job, and he's not going to want to do this. He's Anyway, so I call up Lance, and he's like, I am interested. And so I'm like, this is amazing. This is great. So Lance and I started working together in 2023, and he's also great to have in the office and work with, and it makes the day more enjoyable. He's very smart, and he's very good at learning new things. I get frustrated trying to learn new things, and so Lance is like, I'll do that. I'll figure it out. Lance, we actually just got a new website after 15 years, and Lance built it from scratch, and it's 100 times better than the old one. Looks official now. Anyways, so I enjoy working with Lance quite a bit. Hopefully he takes over Sec Wines one day. And gosh, that's where we are timeline-wise now. But Sec has been great. Working for myself has been both super challenging and super rewarding. There are lots of frustrations. Things come up, mostly logistical things that come up that present challenges that sometimes are out of our control, and we have to find new avenues to get around certain things. So there are definite challenges, but it also super rewarding to put in a bunch of work and then see the fruit from that. But the best thing is just the relationships that I've made. When I started out with this new goofy idea of an online wine shop, I didn't expect to be able to build relationships with customers most of whom I'd never physically see. More of our business is out of state than in state. And so, if somebody's in San Francisco ordering wine from me, or, Boise, Idaho, or wherever they are, I'm most likely never going to see them. And yet, just through email and phone calls to, get updated credit cards and ask follow-up questions to orders, just through that, we've been able to build relationships with these clients, and to the point where, we make each other laugh, we trust each other, and enjoy doing business. Both of us, I think, on both sides, enjoy doing business together, and that's something that's been super rewarding and that I was not counting on initially. And the other thing that's very rewarding is the relationships that I've built with suppliers, importers, great salespeople from different distributors, winemakers. I've become friends with lots of those people. And in business, when I've needed a little something extra that was not normal, I've usually gotten their help because we have this existing relationship already in place. and sense of trust is already there, and camaraderie is already there. So the relationships I've built in over the years are, and this goes back to L&E days too, not just Sec Wines, are the most rewarding part of being in this industry, not just working at one shop or another, but being in this industry. People are super friendly for the most part in the industry. People are happy to talk with each other. I have competitors, but even most of my retail competitors I have a friendly relationship with. But people talk about how to work through problems together, and I don't know, just enjoy hanging out with each other pretty much.
You mentioned obviously the idea for Sec Wines being unique at the time and having this sort of no storefront or at least no physical storefront idea. Tell me about building a wine list around that. What wines did you want to focus on, and how did you start to build out your inventory?
Okay, good question. So since I'd already worked at a retail shop for 15 years, I kind of knew what kind of wines I was familiar with and what kinds of wines there was a customer base for that I could transfer over. So being here in Portland, Oregon, local wines were extremely important to my business. And so I thought I have to have a strong representation from Oregon. I'm also going to focus on Washington State, and which was important for the first few years, but then kind of tailed off when it seemed like all the good Washington producers wanted to, after retailers and restaurateurs had got them on the map, they all wanted to go DTC. So Washington kind of faded out, but I really wanted to be strong in Oregon wines, and I had relationships with lots of small, really good growers already, and got allocations of things that a new wine shop wouldn't get because I'd already been working with these people before. So outside of that, I tried to sell a little bit of California wine, but I realized I couldn't be competitive with California wines in general because my prices were never going to be competitive with people in California selling those wines. But I would sell blue chips like Dominus and things like that. But that was a very minor part of the wine list. So after Oregon being a big thing, European wines were the other area I was most familiar with and comfortable with. So wines from all over Italy, but especially Piedmont and Tuscany, were very important. And Oregon, as a state, has a disproportionate number of great Italian wines available through the work of a number of small little import distributors based here in the state that have done an amazing job. So yeah, Piedmont, super important then and now, but wines from all over Italy. Wines from all over France, but especially Burgundy, Beaujolais, Northern Rhone, Loire Valley, and more than anything else, for me personally, small little grower champagne producers, which is something I am personally passionate about. It's my wife's favorite beverage, and we have a good clientele for that. But wine from all over France, Spain too, Rioja and Rioja Bayesh, and I've been trying to build lately, over the last couple years, a clientele for Albarino, like not happy hour Albarino for $8 a glass, but like really super high quality, legit Albarino. So that, Germany, I started out with a pretty strong German list, especially from the Mosel. That's unfortunately subsided quite a bit because it was really hard to sell those wines, and when I would sell them, it would be a bottle or 2 bottles, and it just became I realized pretty quickly that I should put my energies elsewhere, in terms of making a living. But Austria and Germany were important at the beginning, less so now as from the business standpoint. But personally, I still love Mosel wines and Austrian wines. Let's see, what am I missing? I'm probably leaving something pretty out, but yeah, European wines and Oregon wines. were then and still are now important to me personally and my business. Not that much has changed with European wines other than price points. That's not true. That was a ridiculous comment I just made. So price point, that has changed a bit. Things are more expensive, but mostly for marquee regions like Burgundy, Bordeaux, things like that. Those prices have gotten nuts in some senses. But wines have changed in Italy, or in Europe in certain ways, especially in Italy. When I started out, Italian white wine for the most part was pretty boring, pretty basic. Nobody cared about it, including me for the most part. And over the last 20, 25 years, Italian white wine has become extremely interesting and extremely delicious. And there's a bazillion different aromatic and flavor profiles, and the entire peninsula and Sicily and Corsica, Corsica's France, and are covered with great wine grapes, a lot of them white, and that's changed quite a bit. So, which is great because as marquee wines like white Burgundy have gone through the stratosphere, now for the price of a pretty basic Bourgogne Blanc, you can drink amazing white wine from Mount Etna or Umbria, someplace like that. So there's been an expansion of wine options, very good wine options, over the last 20-some years, I would say that. And that goes for other countries too, but like Italy especially, which is great because you can drink not just delicious, but really interesting wine, if it's not from a super famous region, still for $20, which is hard to do in a lot of regions. It's hard to do here. Let's see. The Oregon wine industry has changed quite a bit since we've had up close and personal look at that. When I started, I think there was probably when I first started at Freddy's, there were probably less than 100 bonded wineries, I'm guessing, in the state. I knew most of the wineries. I could probably name 75% of them. Now I don't think I could name 10% of the wineries in the state of Oregon, which is great. It means the industry's grown quite a bit, although I think it might be ripe for some retraction, which is no fun, but we've got a lot of wineries, and I don't know where they all sell their wine. But anyways, so the Oregon wine industry has been amazing to watch grow. I mean, I met guys that were like my wine heroes, like the late, great Russ Rainey from Evesham Wood, John Paul from Cameron, guys like that were kind of down to earth, making really cool wines that I loved. They didn't take themselves too seriously, and so I got to meet people like that, and then watch their businesses grow, watch the entire industry grow. Mature too, not just get bigger, but actually mature at the same time, and go from this like, what are we doing? I think this is what we're doing, to like, we got a game plan, damn it. We're on track, and the industry has been on track, and it's built, the Willamette Valley in particular, but the whole state, but especially Willamette Valley has become a wine destination for people who are interested in traveling for wine, and thank God it's not Napa, but it's enough it provides a lot of jobs, and makes for a robust industry. And the actual winemaking has improved too. There were great wines in the 80s, but there were a lot of foul balls in the 80s too. Part of that's because the weather was much more variable than it is now, and it's hard not to make at least solid wine now. I mean, how do you not make solid wine when when you have your choice of when you want to harvest nowadays? But the winemaking has gone from being more variable to much more consistently good. I'm not going to say the best wines are better now than they were then, but there are a lot more really, really good wines now than there were then. Both red and white. When I started, it was all Pinot Noir, and Pinot Gris was kind of the thing that Oregon wine industry was pushing, as we're going to make this our own, and now it's I think, I mean, Pinot Gris is still there, but really now it's Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Pinot Noir has always been the focus of our industry. It still is the focus of our industry, both in terms of acreage planted and sales, and it's always been outstanding quality when the winemaker and the source have been top notch. The wines are top notch too. But I think Chardonnay is actually has become Oregon's best best grape variety period. I think the highest heights of Chardonnay are now the best wines in Oregon. Still, there's way more great Oregon Pinot Noirs than Chardonnay, just because there's so much more of it. Mm-hmm. But Chardonnay is, when winemakers take it really seriously, give it all the same love and attention and that they give their Pinot Noirs, and they're amazing. They taste good on the release. They age beautifully for 10, 12 years in a cool cellar. And so that's been a major change, because in the 80s and 90s, people were ripping out Chardonnay and grafting over to Pinot Gris. There's a lot of disappointment, I think, now for some of those people. But anyways, so that's a huge change. Is A, just more consistent quality, and B, the rise of Chardonnay. And I have certain producers who make very good Oregon Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but for some of those producers, their Chardonnay sells better than their Pinot Noirs, which I couldn't have fathomed 20 years ago. I mean, the industry's changed a little bit in terms of the distribution end too. There are more distributors, way more distributors now than when I started. I still only deal with probably maybe 10 or 12 on a regular basis, but I don't know. I think there's probably 35, 40, maybe more out there doing their thing. And the distributors that I like to work with also do some direct importing. Most of them anyway do direct importing. And so besides just distributing nationally imported brands, which is very, very important, they also bring in little producers that, aren't in most markets, and we wouldn't know about if they weren't going out and finding and bringing to us. So the import or the distribution side of things is the industry is really pretty strong and savvy here too. And I don't know how they're making their plans for importing right now with threat of tariffs changing from day to day. But they have a stronger stomach than I do, I guess.
So I'm curious about how you've seen. Actually, we'll go to that one next. First of all, when you're choosing producers, especially Oregon producers, what are the characteristics and traits you're looking for? What kind of wines in Oregon and beyond do you want to sell?
All right, let me focus on the Oregon part of that. So I want to sell wine from Oregon that I feel good about telling a customer they should buy. Like, you can buy something off my website, and I'll, without me ever saying you should buy it or not buy it, it's there. If you want it, happy to give it to you. But like, if I'm going to promote something in an email blast or put it in a newsletter, I have to feel good about telling you should buy this wine if you're interested in this category. That this Pinot Noir comes from a great vineyard, or a vineyard that nobody knows about but is maybe going to become a great vineyard. But it has a great source, and it's really strong in terms of the quality, in terms of its relationship to other wines in the same price range. And it needs to be distinctive. It can't just be, a really super polished, slick, juicy wine, because there's a gazillion of those. So it needs to have some interest to it. I like to sell wines that have a little bit of soil signature or terroir, if you will. But I want wines to be delicious. I want you to think, wow, this wine smells and tastes better than other wines that cost the same amount in its type. And there's some other stuff going on that I wasn't expecting that I like. And so I want there to be familiarity to that Pinot Noir, that Chardonnay, or that Gamay, whatever it is. I want there to be familiarity, because if there's not, then it's not representing its grape variety correctly. But I also want there to be uniqueness to it, and I want there to be individuality to it. So it's that, and then is it correctly priced? I don't want somebody thinking, yeah, that was nice, but I could have gotten something similar for 50% less. I want people to be like, that was worth it. That's great. And so there are those factors. For most of the wines that I sell, it's not a factor, but I've developed these relationships with certain winemakers that I'm excited to sell their wine, and I wouldn't sell it and promote it if I didn't believe in it in and of itself. But I enjoy tasting with certain winemakers and then being like, yeah, this is great. I want to support you and your business. And so that plays a role, but that would never make the email blast or newsletter if the wine didn't deserve it on its own merits. And I try to be very, very cognizant of that and be very aware of it. I have a really good friend who's the winemaker at a winery that we sell a lot of. And that's where I met him, but now we're really good friends. My wife and I eat at his house. He and his girlfriend eat at our house. We're super good friends, and he has a sparkling wine project. And I remember a few years ago, he was going to release his first vintage in 2018, and it had been on triage for 4 years. And I mean, he was doing everything the right way, and I was excited for him, but I was also nervous. I'm like, damn, what if I don't like it? Anyway, so luckily I loved it, and I still love it. And but I had to be aware of, okay, this is my friend's project. I have to taste this and experience this objectively, without any bias. In this case, pro bias, but without any bias. And I had to be very critical. Taste this very critically. And I did, I think. I did. My customers loved it. Anyways, they loved it. But so that does come into play. And I'm always kind of aware of, I don't want to think more highly of this wine because I like you. Mm-hmm. By the same token, there's wineries where I don't have a particularly high opinion of them, and I have to taste their wines with an open mind and be surprised and yeah, this is really good. This is too good for me not to tell other people about. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So those are kind of the ways I think I generally choose to sell Oregon wine.
Do you find that you're seeking people's wines out more often, or are people seeking you out as a buyer of their wines?
Both ways. I look forward to new releases from lots of wineries every year that I'm familiar with, and so I look forward to the new release. But I don't go out looking for new wineries, just because I'm busy selling the wineries I have. There's already more wines that I think are really cool that I don't have time to put in front of other people. I hate a lot of email, and I hate getting spammed, so I try not to send out too many sales emails. And so I don't promote everything I already really like that's already in front of me. And so I don't go out and look for new things. However, occasionally new things find me. We get requests from wineries that hey, can we come in and do a tasting? And usually we'll say yes, and I'll do a tiny bit of research, and if it looks like it could be promising, I'll say, yeah, come on in. And so occasionally we'll start working with new producers, and those are usually direct from directly from the winery. I think the last one we did was not the last one, I don't know, but something like 100 Sons. I get an email from them, and I'm like, I've heard of 100 Sons before, and did a tiny bit of research, and I'm like, yeah, I should talk to these people. Come on in, Grant. And so anyways, and then, you taste the wines and you're like, damn, these are really good wines. And, and you're like, okay, and I like your story and I like you. And you're like, all right, fine, I'm going to add you to the list type of thing. And, but for the most, that doesn't happen that often anymore, just because there's already so many great things to choose from that I can't promote all the things I want to promote already.
Talk about your consumers a little bit. You've obviously been selling wine for a long time. I'm curious how wine consumers have changed in your opinion, or what you've noticed. How have wine consumers changed?
I think wine consumers have changed, especially since I started at like Leiner Nelson and way back then in the 90s, late 90s. It used to be the palette to choose from had a lot fewer colors on it, or grape types or regions. People used to drink local wine, Oregon wine, or California wine. Here in Portland, local customers. Not so much Oregon if you weren't in Oregon back then. And they would drink Bordeaux and Burgundy, maybe Big House Champagne on a holiday, maybe Barolo if they were very savvy, Chianti Classicos and maybe Brunello, Rioja. They would stick to these very well-known Hugh Johnson encyclopedia type wines. That these are famous regions. They've been famous for 100 years. Let's just stick to this. That has changed dramatically. Those regions are still appreciated by consumers, and those regions still get plenty of love. But there are lots of regions that nobody was aware of, much less cared about, in the late 90s, early 2000s, that now people are like looking for. Even areas like Beaujolais. Beaujolais everybody, their opinion of Beaujolais was like, oh, it's that Nouveau crap, which did horrible things for their industry, the Beaujolais industry. But now you have Beaujolais that are allocated when they come out, and you have plenty of good Beaujolais that, for $30 is better than a $120 red Burgundy. Wines from areas in Provence that nobody cared about are popular now. Wines from Sicily are popular, that nobody even thought about. And that goes for all over Italy. Umbria, Greece even is getting some love now, long overdue. A lot of cool Greek wines, especially white wines. So the choices the consumer have now are greater, and they've embraced that. Also, there's so much more value in all these new areas that I've mentioned, compared often to the more iconic regions, like Bordeaux or Napa. So the consumer, at least the consumers I've been lucky enough to deal with at Leiner Nelson and SAC Wines, is the consumer tends to be adventurous, especially the consumers I have built relationships with, because most of the wines that I promote are not from super famous regions. They're well known, but not super famous. I even if I do promote those wines, there's usually wines sprinkled in from less iconic regions or less well-known grape varieties. So the consumer has become more adventurous, which is a massive benefit to the consumer, because they get to try more things, and diversity is fun. But also because they can drink great wine for a lot less money than if you stuck only to the iconic wine regions. Let's see what else. I think consumers have maybe become more engaged with the places they buy wine from. I mean, there are a lot of places online that are essentially vending machines and online wine vending machines, and so probably not there, but like people who go into wine shops now tend to hang out and chat. I mentioned that to my surprise, I've been able to build relationships over email and phones with people, and we correspond. I have customers like, hey, I'm going to be in the Jura, next month on a vacation, and like, somebody will send me like, I was there last year, and they'll send me all their like, this is where I ate, this is where I stayed. So I think the consumer is eager to build the relationship too. But I think more than anything, it's that the consumers change, and that they're accepting and embracing a wider range of wines. And Oregon specifically, it used to be that it was hard to sell much Oregon wine outside of Oregon, unless somebody would come here and visited, and visited a winery or something. It was hard to sell Oregon wine outside of the state. Now we ship wine all over the country, from Oregon wine all over the country, and we have people looking for the next vintage of this and that from Oregon, and they're waiting for it. And so the rest of the country has embraced the Pacific Northwest, which is beautiful.
You mentioned earlier the current situation we're in and tariffs and other sort of anti-alcohol forces at the moment. Tell me about how that has impacted you, or you've seen it impact the industry over the last year, and where the industry is right now.
Yeah, so in this current cycle of tariffs, we haven't really seen a big impact at this point. First, because there was already a bunch of imported wine here in warehouses, in all over the country, and the industry hasn't made it through most of that yet, and so we're not seeing wines yet that have been tariffed very often. Like, I've only have one example personally. So it's too early to say. If it stays at 10%, I think there'll be a slight initial pullback by consumers, but not really. If it stays at 10%, then importer will probably absorb it a little bit, distributor a little bit, retailer a little bit, and then by that point the customer is not paying 10% more, they're paying a little bit less. So that's going to impact the businesses more than the consumer, but more than anything, that's a business, the importer, the distributor, the retailer, the restaurateur, we need to sell it. Even if we're making, each of us is making a little less margin, what's really important is that we're still selling it and the cycle is continuing. If it goes much higher, that is a whole nother story. 4 years earlier, when there was a 25% tariff on some European wines, that was catastrophic for a lot of businesses in the industry. And of course, it wasn't catastrophic for the European industry. It was catastrophic for importers and distributors, to a slightly lesser degree, restaurateurs and retail. But at 25%, people just said no in a lot of cases. And in Portland, I have two friends whose import businesses went out of business because of those tariffs. Yeah. And so, that's terrible, because the business goes out of business. Somebody's lost something that they've built up. Employees have to go find a new job. Their tax revenue is all of a sudden gone, and it affects not just one little angle, not just one part of the business, but it affects the whole industry, and those tariffs trickle down, and it can be really, really devastating. But if they stay at 10%, I think things will still work out. Last year was a difficult year in the wine industry. It was down overall, both in state and nationally. So this is really not at a great time to have another hurdle like that thrown at us. But if it stays at 10%, I think it's still doable. The other big concern right now, besides tariffs, is a larger concern, and that's climate change. When I started out, probably every decade had 2 to 3 really good vintages, had 3 or 4 solid, and had a couple disastrous vintages because it would just be cold and rainy all the time. And there's usually, in the last 15 years, there hasn't been a disastrous vintage. 2011 was difficult and tricky. Still, lots of people made good wine in 2011, even though it was pretty cold all summer long. Now the challenge is, can we get our grapes ripe? Can we get the sugars ripe without alcohol spiking? Can we leave the grapes hanging long enough so that there's flavor development and the stems get ripe and everything reaches an optimal state of ripeness before acidity falls out, causing a flabby wine, and alcohols go through the roof, creating heat and stewy flavors. Can we continue to grow the grape varieties we're growing here in the conditions that those grape varieties thrive in? That's the bigger long-term concern. And luckily, growers and winemakers are figuring ways to combat that, both in the vineyard and when they decide to pick. But if things keep getting hotter and drier, then they'll run out of tricks in their bag, and I don't know what will happen at that point. So that's a concern that's been there for some time, and isn't going to go away anytime soon.
So you mentioned that you thought the Oregon industry was kind of at a time of some sort of regression a little bit, shrinking down a little bit. Tell me about, as you look ahead for Oregon over the next 5-10 years, what does the industry look like? What are you hoping for here, and maybe what are you fearful of coming?
Okay, I'm going to give you my answer predicated on the United States economy not going into recession, not having big trade wars with other countries. I'm going to say it's based on us not going into recession, things kind of being normalish. Okay, if things are normalish, if we're on a normalish curve, I think the Oregon wine industry will continue to grow. I think more and more people will continue to discover Oregon wines. I think more and more people come to Oregon for wine tourism. I think while their vineyards are not going to be continually planted at the same crazy rate not crazy, but the same rate they have been for the last 20 years, I think vineyard plantings will slow down. There's fruit that doesn't get picked. And between not knowing you're going to have a buyer for your harvest is pretty concerning, I would imagine, for a farmer. And then also the weather thing. Are Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Pinot Gris and Gamay, are those going to be viable grape varieties to grow going in 10 years? I know people who they're pretty crafty and savvy, and some of them are planting Syrah, and in places that nobody would have thought about that, in the past. So I think vineyard land will kind of stay where it is or grow more slowly. I think production will be at a similar point it is now. I mean, most of the production that I think is in any kind of danger are wines that you're not talking to people who grow or sell or make those wines. They're at every Safeway and Albertsons and type of thing across the state and country. I think really good wineries are in great shape in terms of having an audience going forward. I think they're in great shape for continued growth. Again, as long as our economy is okay, and as long as the weather doesn't just go get too much hotter, I think they're in great shape. And I think the industry is strong right now. I think there's a strong retail market, a lot of good retailers in Oregon, a lot of good distributors in Oregon. I'm not as familiar with the restaurant side of things, but I think restaurants are doing pretty well, I think. And in terms of selling Oregon wines, they're doing very well. I think that's probably the number one thing for that, for Oregon, or for by the glass, it's probably Oregon wine. I don't know if there's going to be some adapting in the way that restaurants sell wine. I mean, it's funny because you go to a restaurant in Oregon, and maybe you see people drinking wine by the glass. And you see a bottle on one at every 3 tables or something, and then you travel to Europe, and there's bottles on every table. So I don't know if we'll ever get here on the restaurant side to the idea of, hey, what if we take a smaller markup on our wine and just sell more of it and end up with the same dollar amount on the check. And anybody who goes and travels in Europe and drinks wine comes back and says the same thing. Why is it so much more expensive to drink wine here than it is to drink wine there? So even if you're starting out with the same base price on the wine. So it would be interesting to see how that model might work for selling wine locally. But I don't know. I have things that make me optimistic, things that that are concerning over the next 10 years for our industry, in all tiers of our industry. But I think it's going to be all right.
What about for yourself as you look ahead? Anything on the horizon, personally or professionally, that you're excited about?
Lunch?
Very, very near horizon. Yes.
No, let's see. I'm 57, and I'm going to work. Plan on working for a few more years. I would like to keep working at doing what I'm doing now at Sec Wines. Let's see. I'd like to keep doing that for, at least until I'm 60, and then, transition out of that slowly. I'm not in a hurry to leave the industry and retire, but at that point, I would ideally like to work less, not work full time, and turn the reins over to hopefully Lance or whoever else wants to work for me, but hopefully Lance. And then, so that's kind of the next 5-year plan type of thing. I like working, and so I'm happy to keep working now. But I'd eventually like to work a little less. On a beautiful day like today, I'd rather be out fishing or hiking type of thing. And so I plan on doing more of those things. I don't know. Plan on traveling with my wife and hanging out with the wife and the cat and our friends. Most of them who are from the wine industry. I don't know, that kind of thing. And I don't know. I'm looking forward to whatever comes next. And you always think you have an idea of what you're going to be doing and what things are going to be like. And next year, this time, I'll be here and doing that. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. But looking forward to seeing how the next few years play out. And I think I'm optimistic about them.
Excellent. All the questions I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we didn't cover today that you would like to cover?
Gosh, this has been kind of a blur for me, so I can't think of anything.
Is there anything in your notes that we missed?
Oh, let me check.
Before the sun comes over and starts burning you.
Nope. I think we got it.
Nailed it.
Yeah, no, your questioning, your line or your range of questions covered so much, which was great. And I talked more than I thought I was going to talk.
Everybody always does. That's the glory of this. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your beautiful backyard with us, sharing your story with us. Really appreciate you taking the time to be part of our work. And let you off the hook.
Rich, it's a lot of fun. Thanks so much for including me. Appreciate it.